Okay, we're really heading the official. The official topic for today is going to be in Halacha above. But first, I have to say something from Halachas Gimel, Daled, and Hey. I'm not going to read them inside, and that's because Halachas of Gimel, Daled, and Hey are all about handles that are broken, that are not working, and that are stuck in, they're half stuck in, all kinds of things about them. Not to negate to us because we do Tevillas Keilim on new Keilim. It's not a usual situation we have like that. We're going to actually have one question about handles when we get to Halacha Tes and Mitzvah, which talks again about handles. A particular side of the Taka is relevant to us. But what I'm going to mention just for these dinim is, and that's why I'm not reading it, that there is a din about handles. We've talked about this before. Now is to me the right place to mention it, and that is the Darkei Tshuva brings. Is it here? I don't know what the Darkei Tshuva is here. But the Darkei Tshuva brings from the Chacham. You most famously probably know from the Eshel from in Aruch. You also have a sefer Das Kedoshim on your dad. But it took me a while to find the sefer because in the Darkei Tshuva it says Ayin b'kuntrus tes l'hagoyin bal daled kuf. Okay, and I didn't know what those things said. What is it? Kuntrus tes l'bal, and but it turns out that it's about Das Kedoshim. That's it. And he has a kuntrus what? And tes stands for Tevillas Tahara. Okay, but that's not the name of the sefer. That's what it's called on the inside of the sefer. On the outside of the sefer, it's called Amoros Tahiris. Okay, and it's called Amoros Tahiris because it's this little booklet. It's because first he has a whole bunch of things about Tahara that follow it's an acrostic for Amoros Tahiris. The first one is with an aleph. The first one is Achar, and the next paragraph starts with the word Me'achir, and the next paragraph starts with Rabim. So it's Amoros Tahiris. You should remember that. I'm not sure how anybody would remember those. But then it goes according to Aleph days. I just sounds interesting. I'm sorry if I bore you. Then when according to Aleph days, halachas in the order of Aleph days. The first one is Im Isha, the next one Bahasaras, the next one is Gevula. It's Aleph days and Gimel. And then the second set of Aleph days is about Tevillas Keilim, mainly. And then there in the letter Nun, it starts with Nimshach Me'akli, and he says like this. He says, if you have a kli that's made of a material that needs tefillah, for us we'll say it's a metal pot, and it has on it a handle, in his case it's wood, we'll say plastic. Okay, you have a plastic handle on it. So plastic be'etzim doesn't need tefillah, or in his case wood doesn't need tefillah, but it's the handle on a pot that does need tefillah. It's the handle on a metal pot. Okay? So he says, that handle, I'm a little adding some explanation here. He says that handle, since it's considered part of the kli, so just like the metal part needs tefillah, the wooden part, or for our case, the plastic part also needs tefillah. It has to be under the water, and it can't have a chatzitz on it. Okay? It's considered part of the kli, and since it's part of the kli, just like the kli has to dinim, it has to be under the water, and it has to not have chatzitzas, so too the handle, which theoretically doesn't need tefillah, it's plastic or it's wood, he says it needs tefillah also. Okay? So I didn't see anybody who specifically was talking about this besides for him who says this. We had once before. I had two indications. We talked about it like that. One is that the Ramah says if you have a kli that's made of wood, and it has a metal part on it, and the Ramah says if the metal part is functional, it's part of the spout which is functional, then you need to toivel it. Okay, and the implication is you need to toivel everything. Okay? He doesn't say specifically, but the implication is you have to toivel everything. And the second is, Ramesh has a tshuva, which we're going to talk about again 2 times from now. There's a tshuva that if a person has a hot plate, an electric pot, I'm not sure exactly what it was, an electric pot, and he says, and the pot, so the part where the heating source is, doesn't touch the food. And the pot part, the part that touches the food, needs tefillah because it touches the food. It's a klei suda. So he says, this is the part that's for then, since they're considered 2 different keilim, therefore you don't have to tell about the electrical element. Okay, we're going to talk about that then, about why that's true. But the implication is that were they to be considered one pot, if it was not, if we couldn't treat them as 2 pots, we treat them as one, you'd have to tell the electric element part of it also, even though be'etzim it's not chayv tefillah, it's not klei suda, because it's overall, you look at it as one big kli, and if the kli needs tefillah, or part of the kli needs tefillah, then the whole thing needs tefillah.
You spoke about it by the needle of the
Keurig? Yes, I was about to say that. We talked about it 2 times. Once about the needle for the Keurig, that the needle of the Keurig is exactly what the Ramah talks about. The needle of the Keurig is, the Ramah didn't have a Keurig, but it's exactly what he's talking about, which is, you have something that's made of plastic, and it has functional parts that are made of metal. The needle is functional. Without that needle, you'd have no coffee. You need to have that needle over there, that because that the whole thing seemingly is hiding tefillah. And then
what about pot on its cover?
A pot in the cover, I mean, we had that, didn't we? What are they considered one kli or two kelim?
Right.
Okay, we actually talked about it. I didn't remember that case, but we had talked about that.
Remember Chris, you got a Tevillas?
Yeah. We talked about it then. We talked about that, yeah. Let's not...
And you have to hear about the plastic parts of the kettle.
And then the second one is very good. The second case I was about to say, were you reading my notes this night? Was paying attention? So what happens when we try to make an urn that should be owned by a yid from the very beginning. So then we talked about that what some of the people do is the yid makes a kinyan on the metal parts, thinking that the metal parts is what needs tefillah. So if I own that from the beginning, then it was my kli. And we talked about, well, what about the fact that if it needed tefillah, the plastic parts would need tefillah also, and he doesn't have a kinyan on that. Okay, well, whether that's exactly done or not, it's not so clear. Okay, let's go. So that was the argument that maybe since there's nothing to make you chayav, then the plastic is patur. So we say, no, this is a kli that theoretically, overall, this is one big kli. What's the question then? I didn't say that's a question, sir.
Okay. You have to tell me the electric cord.
That's going to be in 2 times. We're going to talk about that. Okay. So now let's do halacha vav. Okay, now in halacha vav, I'm going to read it. We're really going to talk about the Ramah. I'll read the Mechaber already also, because the Mechaber we're going to talk about for next time. The Mechaber says like this, kli shekafa piv lamata. If you take a kli, think of a bottle, and you turn it upside down, the opening is facing down, and you stick it into the water. In piv tsar ktsas, if the opening is very narrow, hafach piv lamayla, and you didn't turn it right side up, then we also feel, which we better if we had an empty one of these bottles. We also feel doesn't work. Why? If you turn the kli like this and stick it into the water, if this would be empty and you stuck it in, water won't get to the top because there'll be an air bubble. Okay, there's going to be an air bubble inside the kli. Unless you turn like this, the air bubble won't go out and it won't work as a tefillah. We're going to, in Mirz Hashem, talk about that next time. In Zion and Ches, the Mechaber comes back to this thing about an air bubble, that in Mirz Hashem for next time. Okay, so for now, we're going to ignore that. Okay. The Ramah says, Mutter litbal kli b'soch kli. You can be toivel one kli inside of another. Im yesh b'pi hachitzan kisheferes hanoid. If there's an opening of a shveferes hanoid in the opening of the outside kli. Okay, so let me just explain that for a second, then we'll read the rest of the Ramah, which means is if you have a kli, if you wanted to be toivel this, I wish I needed a pot over here, it's only bigger, this inside of another kli, the rule is that for the water inside the outer kli is not kosher for tefillah unless it's connected to the mikvah with what's called the sheferes hanoid. A sheferes hanoid is about 2 inches. The Mechaber says it's the width of the 2 fingers next to your thumb. The Poskim say it's 5 centimeters, and it's about 2 inches. Okay, unless you have a certain opening. Okay, you're familiar with this. You've seen this, whether you realize it or not. You've seen this when you look inside of a mikvah. You see it's connected. The place that you toivel in, that has water that they change all the time, is connected to the place with the rainwater, and there's an opening there. Okay, there'll be an opening between one and the next, on the side or on the bottom. There's an opening, and that opening, you'll notice, is a couple inches across, and the point of it is that it should be kisheferes hanoid. That kind of an opening is considered a connection. Anything less than that is not considered a connection. Okay, so the Ramah says you could toivel one kli in another. If the outer kli has an opening of sheferes hanoid connecting it to the mikvah, then it's all considered together, and you could toivel on the inside kli. Okay, that's what we're going to come back to.
Even if a person, would that be a kosher mikvah for a person?
Yes.
Toivel into a kli?
The point is, once you do sheferes hanoid, I believe that that's not, it's considered now, it's not a kli, it's bottle to mikvah. I'm not talking about for people. I've been looking at it for Keilim now, but okay, now, Vizar, I'm going to read the rest of the Ramah. It's not negate us. We're going to get just free. Vizar kli hapnimi yirafu b'tzach kli hachitzin. Now the Ramah says, wait a second. If you put one kli into another, you're going to have a problem that the inner kli may not be surrounded by water. It's going to be touching the outer kli. So make sure that it should be loose so that the water gets in. You shouldn't put a knife. I think he means this in like these holders that hold knives that you poke them into it. So you put it into it. If you dunk the whole thing in with its outer holder, you see this in kitchens. They have a knife poked into a hole. Then the point of the knife, the blade of the knife, won't have tefillah because it'll be touching this holder. There's probably a name for these holders, and it won't get into the water. Okay. Also, if the inner kli is very heavy and it's inside of the outer kli, it's in before you put it into the water. It won't have tefillah at the place where it's sitting because that part is so heavy it doesn't get water underneath it. Which we're going to talk about in a minute. Okay. So what did the Ramah say? The beginning of the Ramah, which is the part we're going to focus on, the Ramah said was, if you have a tefillah of one kli inside of another kli, you have to have a hole that's a Kashrus feres hanot. Okay? What the Ramah is saying is, it's from a Mishnah. It's a Mishnah, in case you're curious. It's a Mikvah, paragraph halach Mishnah Beis. That one side. In other words, you have to have this hole that's Kashrus feres hanot. Okay? Sounds easy enough. Okay. The Rishonim ask, this is our din. Okay, what the Ramah says, which is from a Mishnah, that an outer kli has to have an opening of Kashrus feres hanot. Okay, I'm making to a chart because you're going to see is on the left side. I'm going to show you there are going to be two Mishnayos and two Gemaras that are going to be seemingly associated with each other. Okay, and then we're going to say three answers that Rishonim or early Achronim give to those questions. Okay, that's what we're going to see, and then we'll see that as we go on the halacha l'maisa part of these different answers to these kashrus. Okay, so the first is our din is that if the Ramah, which is a Mishnah, says if an outer kli, you could tell one thing in another kli, the outer kli has to have an opening that's Kashrus feres hanot. Okay. Then there's another Mishnah. Okay, it's a few Mishnahs later. I think it's Mishnah Hay in the same parak. Okay, and the other Mishnah says you could do if you put Keilim into a sack. Okay, that's the case we're going to pick from that Mishnah. If you put it into a bag, into a sack, you stick a bunch of Keilim into a sack and you put them into the mikvah. It works. Okay, it doesn't say anything there about a Kashrus feres hanot, and the assumption is that a sack doesn't have a Kashrus feres hanot. It's like what? So the assumption is you're not dunking it in all the way in, but we'll see about that in a second. Okay, we'll see about that. So the assumption is you're dunking it in. The thinking is that the person is doing it just like an hour did. He's trying to avoid his kelim falling into the mikveh, so he puts them into the sack. So the Mishnah says nothing about having a Kashrus feres hanot, and so the assumption is that it would not have one. Okay.
The water goes through it, though? The water goes through it.
The water goes through. But there's no Kashrus feres hanot. There's no Kashrus feres hanot.
But not in one spot.
There's no hole that's Kashrus feres hanot.
It's full of holes.
That what?
There's a whole lot
That what?
The kli has one opening. So
Right.
as opposed to saying where the water is going through it.
Okay, we're going to see different answers. We're going to see different answers. I'm going to give you the questions first.
That's like
Since there's going to be three answers, you're going to probably become to someone's answer, no matter whatever you say.
people often use like a net bag for cutlery, table cutlery.
Right? Okay, the same idea. That this Mishnah says you're allowed to do that. Okay. Okay. The next is the Gemara in Chagiga. The Gemara has two cases. Okay. First, the Gemara says that you could do tefillah inside of a basket. Okay? When it says do inside a basket, it sounds like the Mishnah I just said to you, that you could do inside of a sack and a basket. It sounds like basically like the same thing. So we have the same question. I mean, so whatever works for this is going to work for that. This is not like our din. Okay? But the very same Gemara says that if you have a basket that splits a mikvah, then you can't use it for tefillah. Well, wait till what's going on. For whatever reason it works to tevel in the basket, what's the difference if the basket now, what's the words of the Mishnah? I don't have the words in front of me.
Each side less than your mikvah.
That's going to be our answer. But the Gemara says if you have this basket in the middle of the mikvah, now you can't do it. Okay, so mikvah shechokah b'sar in the basket. Okay, so what's going on? So we have these four cases. Okay, two Mishnayos and two Gemaras. Okay, that the Rishonim are going to give three, and two Rishonim and an early Achron are going to give, three different answers how to answer these dinim, and we'll see the halacha l'maisa application of these cases. Okay. There's going to be three answers here: a Ravyah, and a Chacham Tzvi, and a Rash. Okay. The first is going to be the Ravyah. The Ravyah says like this. He says that the Ravyah says the ikka part of the Ravyah shita is if you have a lot of holes together, they can be mitzurif to make a Kashrus feres hanot. Okay, so we have to have a Kashrus feres hanot. That's for sure. You have to have that. You do. But if you have a lot of holes, then you can have 50 holes that are each very small, but together they're Kashrus feres hanot. So then things are good. So in the second and the third case, the second Mishnah and the first Gemara, the reason why it works is a sack's got a zillion holes in it. Okay, and so does a basket. It's got a lot of holes in it, and it means is that there's enough holes to make it that there was altogether Kashrus feres hanot. A kli doesn't have holes in it. A kli is relatively solid, so it has one hole. So the Mishnah says that hole has to be Kashrus feres hanot. But if you have a sack or a basket, well, a basket, you talk about a wicker basket. A wicker basket's got lots and lots of holes in it. So if you have a lot of holes in it, so then mature, and you could, and that works. Okay. But he says, also so. Okay. In our case, I think this is coming next. In our case, it's just one hole. Yeah, good. Okay, lucky me. There's only one hole in it. There's only one hole, and that's why it has to be Kashrus in it. Okay, so the case that the case that's the hardest to understand according to the Ravyah is why is it if the mikvah is split by the basket, is it not good? What's the difference? The basket, it's the same basket, it's got the same amount of holes in it. So the pshat is that in that case, it's talking about that the mikvah does not have a full mikvah on either side. Okay, so it's mikvah shecholka b'sal means you split it, not that you just happen to put it divide. You literally split the mikvah in half. That there's only 20 saw on this side and 20 saw on that side, no, 30 and 10. There's not enough mikvah on each side of it. So over there, even though tziruf works, tziruf does not work to create a mikvah. It only works to stretch the mikvah. Okay, to make the mikvah go from here to there, that's good. But if you need it to make the mikvah, that does not work. Tziruf only works if you have a complete mikvah already. Okay, so according to Ravyah, okay,
So even though there's water in the basket, which is connected to the water on both sides,
but if there be a shefer or no, then it would be one big mikvah. If there would be one hole that would be that big, that would be fine. But if you want to be mitzaref all the holes together, that won't work. If you had one big hole, that would be fine. If you had one really big hole, that would be fine. But a lot of little holes, you can't be mitzaref them. Tziruf only works when you have a full mikvah. Okay, the Machaber and the Ramah Poskim it's in Siman Resh Aleph Sifn and Beis Poskim like this Ravyah. They pass like this Ravyah. The Chacham don't say anything, and the implication is that they're masking to this thing. Okay,
two holes together. Is that multiple holes? If two holes together makes sure it's not good.
So it's actually there's one of that. I'm not going to say who. Someone who brings up this and says no, it has to be a lot of holes. It's not clear where that would come from. Okay, the Ravyah doesn't say that. The Ravyah just says you could do with of holes. Okay, it doesn't give in the cases it happens to be there are many holes, right? But a sock or a basket, there are many holes, right? You think of a basket, the wicker of a basket that has a zillion holes. It's not so clear. And if there is, what would be the shear? There's 2 holes, or 3 or 4. What? Okay.
If you put a knife into a net and just put the knife literally just above, beneath the surface of the mikvah, is those small amount of holes going to be a shefer on it?
You mean if there won't be enough holes in it?
I'm asking you.
It potentially will not be. He says, let's say you had, he had a fancy case. This is different. Let's say you had a thing that doesn't have a shefer sanoid. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about that in a minute. The Ravyah would hold that it's not kosher. Let's say you had a basket. Yossi said there's only 1 hole. Let's say there were 5 holes. Okay, in between the 5 holes, it wasn't shefer sanoid. So it would not be kosher according to the Ravyah. When we say that those cases, let's get rid of it. I don't know. It's not for me. When the Mishnah said that you could do it in a sack, it's the assumption that all those holes together make a shefer sanoid. If it would not be, then it would not be good.
Okay, I'm just wondering, is that really true? In a sack, all the holes together make a shefer sanoid. Of course. What?
Could be if you have one pound move on limit anyways.
Then what?
You don't need anything. So.
That's not the Ravyah's sheet. We'll come to that in a second.
Okay, second. That's personal movable limit.
But it's got. But it's got. I guess the assumption is it has so many holes in it that probably. Okay.
That's never called what she's going to figure out.
It's coming second. Okay. So according to the Ravyah, we understand why. I think this is our next slide. We understand why in Keilim Mikvah they have baskets in them. Okay, it's exactly what the Mishnah says. You could title in a basket. The basket has a lot of holes in it. Between those holes, you have a shefer sanoid, and it works on one condition. And the condition is that the mikvah has to have in it 40 saw besides what's in the basket. Okay. In other words, according to Ravyah, it doesn't work if there's no 40 saw in the basket. Now, it happens to be
no 40 saw in the basket.
If there's no 40 saw out of the basket, out of the basket.
So you can't stick the basket in such a way that it goes from top to bottom in the center of the mikvah and divides the mikvah.
So in this, in this mikvah that this picture is taken at, in the thing that you see in front of you, there are barely 40 saw of water. Okay, there was barely 40 saw of water, and if you stick the basket in too deep, there will not be 40 saw outside the basket. Okay, now.
Not even on the side?
Right. Now,
the basket, put the whole basket in there.
If you put it in relatively deep, I did the math if you want for later, it would not be 40. Now, but it happens, but
it's covered over anyway.
If you put the whole thing in there, it has shefer sanoid in one place.
So, if this was really an issue, they would put a shefer sanoid high up on the basket. Okay, but
you can take out one of those cross sections of plastic and you have
right. But the truth is that in modern mikvahs, it's uncommon that this is the rainwater that you're sitting in. Really, there's water underneath it. Okay, whether this mikvah has it or not is a question. But we can talk about that separately. But in a typical mikvah, I'll talk to you later. In a typical mikvah, there's 40 saw. It's connected to something else. Thank you. In a typical mikvah, what? Reeds? No, that's in New York. So in a typical mikvah, there's connected to another place that has the 40 saw for real, and what you see in front of you is just like a spillover. Okay, now.
Why does that basket on the left have the holes in the bottom?
Why does it have holes on the bottom as opposed to what?
Somebody made holes in the bottom. It came with just holes on the side that somebody would...
Probably to help make it sink better. That's probably the truth. Okay? Or maybe because they want to hold like the Rash. We'll see in a second. Maybe they want to hold like the Rash. Maybe they're really smart. Probably not. Probably just make it sink better. Okay, now. The same kind of an issue about if there being 40 outside is in the Tui mikvah, there's a lucite shelf, a plastic shelf in the middle of the Keilim Mikvah so that your Keilim don't fall down. Okay? If that shelf does not go all the way across, it only goes, let's say, halfway across. If it were to go all the way across, all the way from one side to the other, and just have little holes in it, and it would not have 40 saw underneath it, we'd have the same problem. Okay? It would be mamish a mikvish chalka besal, in this case a mikvish chalka belusite. Then, if according to the Ravyah, if there wouldn't be 40 saw underneath it, then it wouldn't be kosher. Again, it's probably connected to a real bar anyhow. Okay. Now, the last case we want to talk about is, which some of the Achronim talk about this, it seems like it's a real shayla that comes up, which is, in the hashaka hole, in that hole that's between the rainwater and the water that gets changed all the time, they want to put a grate over that thing, and I assume they want to put it so things don't move back and forth between them. Like somebody's spoon doesn't fall into there, or someone's towel, I don't know, it doesn't get stuck in between these things. They want to put a grate in there. Okay, so when they want to put a grate, think about what a grate is. A grate is going to have holes that are each less than sheferet sanoid. Each one of the holes is going to be smaller than that, and between them all is going to be sheferet sanoid because a grate has basically all holes. There's very little material there, so it's going to be enough if we mitzaref the holes. So, assuming there's a full mikvah on the other side, which we're hoping there's a full mikvah on the other side, the Ravyah would be happy about putting a grate onto there. Okay, we're going to see these Achronim who talk about it do not want you to put a grate because they hold like the other shittas. Okay, but the Ravyah would have been happy that you should put a grate onto there because the let's say there's 5 holes in the grate, they're mature together to make you kishver tonight, and he'd be more than happy with that.
It was exactly the right amount that it would have worked because
if the hole was made exactly 2 inches across, and now we put the grate onto it, we're not going to have full 2 inches. But nobody does it exactly like that. No one's like that. People are very careful, machmir, call it what you want to, about mikvahs kind of things. They make it very careful. There's some of the chuvas that I saw here talk about people you think of a tefach across, okay, which is way bigger than you need to do. So whatever, if you look at the thing next time you go to the mikvah, you'll see it's a nice big spot. You're 3-4 inches across. Okay.
Isn't that something that sheferet sanoid is the same as pesach limud?
That's what people consider that, and chuvas say no, there's no such thing. Okay, but there's such a talk about it. Yes, there's such a talk about it. Okay. So that's the first sheet that we had. The first sheet that we had was the Ravyah. Okay. Chacham Tzvi says no such thing. There is no such thing as holes being mitzvah. It doesn't exist. He says, I don't know the Mishnayos mikvahs. I don't barely even find mikvahs in my Mishnayos. And he says in Mishnayos mikvahs it says every time there's a din where tziruf works, it tells you the Mishnah tells you there's such a thing. He says, how come over here if this was talking about tziruf, the Mishnah would have told you. There are other places where when it wants to tell you that there's such a thing as tziruf, it tells you. It's not shy. So he says there's no such thing as tziruf. The only time that you can say that water from the inside connects to the water on the outside is if the thing itself is completely porous, which is to say, is in a sack. Even the fabric itself doesn't prevent water from going through. The water goes right through the fabric. There aren't solid and parts and liquid parts. Even the solid parts, even the cotton or the wool that it's made out of, water goes right through that also. Okay, maybe if we are really scientific, we'd say yes, there are barriers, but essentially, water passes right through the thing. There's nothing stopping it at all. So in that case, you're not mitzaref the many holes. There is no barrier. The water on the inside and the outside is the same thing. The water goes right through. The Mishnah's lashon is the neshi shema arven. Okay, the mamsha goes right through, and that's why it works when you do tefillah in a sack. Is because the water goes straight through.
So according to him, you could even put a sack in between the beira tefillah and the beira shaka.
Yes, you could. You couldn't put a grate. You can't put a grate because the grate has solid parts in it. You could only put a sack. You could only put a sock. Okay, if you wanted to, yes, you could put a filter. You could put one of the. You could put one of the bug mesh shmatas, Okay, so okay, so now that's going to help us explain most of the cases. Okay, so we know in this case why you can do tefillah in a sack. We know in our case you can do tefillah in a kli because obviously the kli's got solid parts to it, and that's why it doesn't work. And we know the last case because when you put the sal across the mikvah, we understand that because the sal has no holes in it. I mean, it has solid parts to it. Okay, so we have our only question is the Gemara who said that you could tevel things in a basket. Why does the Gemara say you could tevel things in a basket? Whereas the basket has holes in it, but the basket also has solid parts to it. So the Chazanish says that I don't see that the Chazanish answers this question. The Chazanish says, there is diyukim in the Chacham Tzvi. I don't see that he directly says it. The Chazanish says that what the Chacham Tzvi will say is that it's talking about that the guy submerged the whole basket in the Keilim Mikvah. Okay, and that's not the Kashrus. By no means is that the simple understanding that the guy stuck the whole basket in, but he put the stuff into the basket and he dunked the basket all the way under the water. But the point is he's so far under that the top of the basket had a Sheferes Hanoid. In other words, it's talking about there's a Sheferes Hanoid even though it doesn't say that. Essentially that's what's going on. The basket means you stuck it all the way in. Okay? By no means is that the Kashrus. Okay, now
I mean the Mishnah could have said, say basket, whatever. It didn't say basket, it should say pot. You could put stuff in a pot. You could submerge the whole thing.
I mean, had you done it, if you were going to be talking about it, stuck it all the way in, then the basket is not... He's saying, realistically, you'd want to tevel in a basket. Okay, but I mean, but come on, the other Mishnah said you could put one kli into another kli. It wasn't, a perfect thing, so you can't do that. Okay, it's a fair question. This whole case, according to the Chamsi, is very not simple. Okay, it's not a simple way to read it. Okay, now, according to I don't know if this was my next picture coming. Yeah, according to the Chacham Tzvi, you can't have a basket in your mikvah. Okay, according to the Chacham Tzvi, I mean, unless you stick it all the way under, which is not what people are doing. According to the Chacham Tzvi, there's no such thing as tzir for holes. Okay, so these are not porous. The plastic parts that are here, those plastic parts don't let water through. So these things you could not have. According to him, you could not have a plastic basket in the mikvah. Okay. And the same thing is for other cases. Our shelf or our grate over the mikvah cover, all those things would not work according to Chacham Tzvi because there's no such thing as being mitzaref holes. The Ramah, our Ramah, the shelf it was all the way across. If it was not all the way across, then there's a Sheferes Hanoid on each side of it. Okay, so when our Ramah says "V'ayin le'el siman reish aleph sif tes," if you look in reish aleph sif tes, the Ramah over there says not like this. Okay, there's actually a question of girsas in the Mishnah, and the Ramah, the way he quotes the Mishnah, is exactly like what I'm about to say, the third shita. Okay, not like the Chacham Tzvi. He says you can tevel things in a basket in the mikvah. Okay, essentially that's what the Ramah says. Okay, so not like this Chacham Tzvi. Okay, third shita is the Rash. Okay, the Rash says he's in between these two shitas, between the Ravyah and the Chacham Tzvi. He says the only issue is when you do tefillah in a kli. If you do tefillah in something which is not a kli, then that's okay. Okay, you don't need Sheferes Hanoid if it's not a kli. Okay, which is to say it's like this. So in the case that our din is talking about, you're doing one kli inside of another kli. The other kli holds water. Right? You put a spoon into a pot. The pot holds water, and therefore you can't do tefillah unless you have Sheferes Hanoid. But if you do it in anything else, if you do it in a sack or a basket, they're not Keilim. Okay, they're not Keilim. So they don't, the way he says it, it doesn't make them to Shuvim. There's nothing, that basket that you put it into, or the sack that you put it into, they don't hold water. So it's not that the holes are mitzurif. It's not we're trying to, they are, the Ravyah said the holes come together to make a Sheferes Hanoid. He says, you don't need a Sheferes Hanoid because there's no barrier between the mikvah water and this water. This water is nothing. It's not in anything. It's in something, but that something is nothing that causes a problem for mikvahs. Okay? So the only thing that would make a problem is if you have something that has that holds water. Okay, a kli that holds water, like what we think of a pot, that's what you wouldn't be able to do now. Okay? So the only question we have left then, the one we're left not understanding is the last Gemara, which says if you have a solid.
Why doesn't it hold water in the sack?
Doesn't hold water? Because it doesn't hold water. Because it has no holes. No. But it's not that the holes are mature to make a sheferes hanoi. Like, for example, like what he said before. What happens if you had many holes that were not sheferes hanoi?
Yeah.
That would be fine. Doesn't make a difference.
Only there's one hole.
Right. So let's say
One little hole at the bottom. Shalom Aleichem.
Correct. That's not a
No, it's not true. One hole not kisher hanoi. It's the perishable block is not good. You need kisher hanoi.
No. If the hole's on the bottom, he's saying, is if it's a cleat that doesn't hold water, if you put your hole on the bottom instead of like the normal way you put on the top, if you have 3 holes on the bottom that are not kisher hanoi, that's fine. We're not trying to be
one hole not kisher hanoi. The bottom would be fine.
One. That's correct because it's not a cleat.
It could have to be mamish like one hole on the bottom of a basket might not be.
So that's what I said to you. They were trying to be choshesh for this Rash, because if those other holes are like an inch off the bottom, if they didn't make holes on the bottom, then according to the Rash, it would still hold water.
This halacha, the hole has to be kisher hanoi. It's only if it's on the side of the cleat, but it's on the bottom. If it's in a kisher hanoi.
Right. A normal cleat only has a hole on the top. And when you have a pot at home, you don't have pots with holes on the bottom, because else there wouldn't be pots.
Oh, about the neck.
Yeah, a normal regular cleat, it holds water. But a sack or a basket, they don't hold water. They're not meant to be keilim for holding liquids. They're not cool, so to be keilim. Okay, so according to the Rash, that's one of, I was going to say it later, but according to the Rash, the holes don't have to be equal to sheferes hanoi. That's not the point here. The goal is not to make, we're not like the Ravyah who said, we're mitzaref all the holes together to make a sheferes hanoi. No, we're not trying to do that. We're just saying, if it has holes in it, it's not a cleat. And therefore, we understand all 3 out of the 4 cases we understand more simply. The last case is that we're not going to understand. Why, if you put the basket across the mikvah, why should that make a difference? Again, that basket, it's the same basket. It doesn't hold water either. Okay? So, the answer to that question is, that in that case is, the Rash says is, if something is attached, then it's also not bottle. Okay, the way he looks at it is, when it's not a kli, it's bottle, it's tuffle, it's ignored, it's meaningless to the mikvah. When something is attached, then that by its nature can't be bottle, can't say we ignored it as if it's not there, and therefore, mikvah shechok b'sal, it's attached. And since it's attached, reasonably attached, therefore you can't use it. It is considered something that splits up the mikvah, and then unless you have one hole that's kisher sheferes hanoi, many holes not going to help you. Unless it be one hole kisher sheferes hanoi, it wouldn't be working. Okay, now, so what comes out is that the Rash and the Ravyah both hold that if you have lots of holes that are not kisher sheferes hanoi, it could work, but they come in from different angles. The Ravyah said it has to be through tziruf, and the Rash said it's because you don't have a kli. Okay? Also, the Rash and the Ravyah both hold that we don't care if the space, the solid part between the holes is porous or not porous. It's not important. We're only looking at the whole part of it. If there's either many holes for the Ravyah or there's holes to make it not a kli, we don't care about the solid part. As opposed to Chacham Tzvi cares that is there a solid part in between or is there not a solid part in between? Okay. So the case of a nafkamina between the Rash and the Ravyah is the great cover in the mikvah. Okay? According to the Ravyah, that we're mitzaref the holes. If we have enough holes to make it sheferes hanoi, which we usually would, then it would be fine. You're allowed to put a great cover over that hashaka hole. But according to the Rash, you can't because it's attached. And the way the Rash says, the way the Chazanish explains it, the great, something that's attached, it needs a full sheferes hanoi. So according to the Rash, you could not put a great cover onto the hole between the one bar and the next in the mikvah.
So why did that attach in the case of the bottom case?
When it says mikvah shechok b'sal, I mean someone put something there. They attached it. It was divided.
We're saying it kept it. We're making it kept it.
No. It's chok b'sal as it's dividing the mikvah. That has a sort of feeling that it's attached to it.
You stuck it in there? What you stuffed it?
I'm not sure how attached. I'm not sure how firm it has to be. Right. It has to be. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how permanent it has to be. But if you put the grate cover, that's what we would care about. The grate cover between the 2 bars, that's attached. Someone screwed it in, or they welded it, so they cemented it. That's permanently attached. So according to the Rash, according to the Ravyah, that would be perfectly fine. I don't care. So there's enough holes to make it together.
It's sitting there with gravity, like in a broad-gobbling bar.
And you just laid it down there. So I'm not sure what it takes to be attached.
Not attached at all.
But it's permanent. So it's not clear. I asked, but it's meant to be there. I'm not sure. Maybe. I'm not sure. I don't think that anybody would do that. Yeah, I think they would really just lay it down there and not attach it somehow.
They want to service it.
They want to service the underneath part. Right. You wouldn't think that, but maybe I'm not sure. Okay. So the Rash again would allow you to put a basket into the mikvah. Okay, because the basket, every basket we have has plenty of holes in it. Okay.
You're assuming the Rash doesn't hold the sears. Because there's no evidence, so you assume he doesn't hold it.
I'm saying the Rash... Right, now, actually, the Ramah holds to both. The Ramah says both of them. So it's not, the implication is that you could hold both of them. But the Rash, there's no... I don't know what the Ravyahs are from the Mishnah, because in this Mishnah... Now, I have to tell you. Let me back up. I forgot to tell you something. I told you 4 cases. Okay, there are really many more cases in this big Shulchan Rishonim about how to answer all these steers up. Okay, so there are other cases which I'm not telling you, and some of them I don't even know. Okay, and so we're just to say maybe they'll rise from some of those other cases. Okay, but from what we see, if you said like if the Ramah says like the Ravyah that Matzar holds, then how does he know this other din or the other way around? You know, if you hold of the Rash that as long as it doesn't hold water, that's the Ramah almost Mamash says almost beferish the words of the Rash. So then what is he? Maybe he doesn't hold the tzir then also. Okay, so let's go through some cases. And then I'm going to tell you some of the later achronim where we're already running late. Okay. I'm going to have 5 cases here. The first is, would we let tziruf of holes? Okay, so the Ravyah is the only one who holds of tziruf, that you could put many holes together to make a shaver sanoid. Others, the Rash might hold that it's mutter for a different reason, but not through tziruf. There's no such thing as tziruf according to those. And would you allow tefillah in a sack? Basically, everybody says yes. Okay, I wrote usually for the Ravyah on those 2 cases because it only works if there's 40 saw on the other side. But that's usual. The typical case is there's going to be 40 saw on the other side. So basically, they're going to say yes. Okay. Would we allow tefillah in a plastic basket? Okay. So the Ravyah and the Rash will allow it, and the Chacham will not allow tefillah in a plastic basket. And the reason why he doesn't allow it is because
it's not porous.
It's not porous. Okay. It has a plastic. Okay.
There's no reason why you go to a mikvah why you should.
No, unless you don't tape it up.
Don't tape it up and you're trying,
There are more Poskim like that.
So I'm coming to them later in a second, okay? But according to Chacham, you cannot have a plastic basket in the mikvah, correct? I'm going to talk to my in a second. What?
Let's push it down.
I mean, no, it's not push it down if you're there, it's not a big deal. Push it down.
Okay, next. Okay, would we let a shelf if there was no shofar center, it was all the way across? So the Ravyah would say it would depend if you had 40 saw below it, okay? And the Chacham and the Rash would not allow it. It's not such a common child list. And the last is, I don't know why it says all great cover. A great cover, probably should say. A great cover on a hashaka hole. So the Ravyah would say that you could have it. The Rash would say you can't have it because it's attached. The Chacham would say you can't have it because he's not mitzvah holes. He has no such thing as putting it together. It's not porous, and you wouldn't be allowed to do it. Okay? So now, I written not to some of the achronim. I told you already that the Machaber and the Ramah say like the Ravyah, and the Taz and Shachar quite they sound like they hold like that also. Okay? Right there on the page, Dagam Ravava says Ayin Chacham Tzvi, okay, which has a certain implication that he holds like the Chacham Tzvi. And there's somebody who printed notes of a shir that Rabbi Yashiv gave about these kind of questions. And in there, Rabbi Yashiv, he doesn't bring all the shittas, but he favors the Chacham Tzvi. Okay? And it even says in there that you therefore can't have a basket in your mikvah. Okay? Now, that, in those notes that were printed, in the original place it says it was printed by someone who heard the shir. Okay? Then it was reprinted in Keilim Mikvah, and there someone forgot about that part of the page. So it just says as if Rabbi Yashiv said it. So
what?
Just the whole thing is as if he wrote the tshuva. He didn't actually write the tshuva. Someone, it's in Chelik Daled, I think it is. Someone wrote over what he heard at a shir. So for whatever it's worth. He said you should be back on the Tzvi. That's as far as it was. So again, if he would have written the tshuva himself, it has certain more credibility. But someone heard the shir, maybe he said. So there's a tzad to say like this. The niggun that he said it doesn't come across in the. But in the printed tshuva, it doesn't say in the book in the Keilim Mikvah, it doesn't say this was written by somebody else who heard the shir. But in the original journal, I saw in the original journal.
We don't have Yashiv didn't write these. We don't have any.
Okay, so in the original journal,
20 years ago, people can write because of Rabbi Yashiv because they don't, people are looking to see the same. But
right, I mean, he wrote something. Actually, he didn't write nothing. But in this case, he did not write. I'm telling you, I saw it first, not in Keilim Mikvah. I saw it first in the journal, and in that journal, it says on the bottom, have the air, or something like that. Or something like that. I don't even think it says the guy's name.
Does it say how often, do we know how thoroughly Rabbi Rash have checked over the printed, like what they were publishing in his name in Kashrus?
They printed if he was not alive anymore. Okay. I don't think that Chayil Dalet was printed in his life.
I was very thoroughly done with it.
Yeah, there were just people who
barely made it.
right.
Barely exists.
People who just pull things in. Okay. So on the other hand, the Chacham Tzvi is the only one who would not allow tefillah in a basket. Okay, what we do too, if you look at the chart, and as we went through the Cheshbonis, the Chacham Tzvi is the only one who wouldn't let tefillah in a basket. The Ramah, the Farish says you can do tefillah in a basket. The Ramah is mamish the words of the Kamat, the words of the Rash, that you can do tefillah in a basket. And if you've ever been in the Keilim Mikvah, every Keilim Mikvah in the world's got a basket in it. Okay? I'm not. It's hard to believe that.
There's a board of
They're not allowed. They're not allowed.
Wait. It's possible that a lady brought it. It's true. It's possible someone just brought it without realizing it. But then somebody walked into there and they saw someone who knows the talking that would see it. Okay, maybe. I don't believe that. It's every mikvah in the world, every Keilim Mikvah in the world that you've ever been in has one of them. It's like a fixture. It's like it's like having Gugan next to it. They have that on the side.
It needs to have a shofar on it. That means you can't take a box, make two little holes in it, and thing. It has to have.
So according to the Ravyah, you have to have enough holes to make your shofar on it. That's true. That would be true. So I was going to mention, I was about to say that the Chazanish thinks that the Rash is correct. Okay, the Chazanish is convinced that the Rash is correct to the point that the Chazanish says, "I'm not sure if you should be machmir. What happens if the Chazanish picks on the other case? What would happen if the mikveh would not have 40 saw on the outside of the basket? Okay, what would happen if there wouldn't be 40 saw on the outside? So the Chazanish says, where the Rash would be mekel, but the Ravyah would not be. He says, I'm not sure if you need to be machmir for the Ravyah in that case. That's how convinced he was that the Rash is correct. Now, the Chazanish doesn't look about the other case, where there are 5 holes, but the holes are not enough to make a shofar sanoid. But seemingly it should be the same thing. He said, I'm not even sure you should be choishes for the Ravyah, even though Shulchan says like that. Shulchan and all Poskim like that. He says, I'm not sure if you should be machmir for that, because he thinks the Rash is so correct. Okay, he says completely, the Chazanish says completely ignore the Chacham Tzvi. He has a whole bunch of kashrus on it. He says, ignore what the Chacham Tzvi says. He has a whole bunch of kashrus on him. He says, forget it. Just ignore that. He says, and the Rash he thinks is correct. The Ravyah, he says, I'm not sure if you should be machmir for that. It isn't 40 so, or for our case, if you had only a few holes in it. Okay, imagine if they'd taken that basket, the small basket that I showed you beforehand, and had no holes on the side. And the guy just drilled 3 holes on the bottom that weren't his shofar sanoid. He says, I'm not sure if you have to be machmir for that case. Okay, and the last is, a lot of these, there's a Shulchan from Shulchan, and I mentioned Shulchan from Ravyah, who talk about this great cover. Okay, so the great cover, the only one who lets you have a great cover would be the Ravyah. He says you can be tzaref the holes together. So Shulchan says you should not have a great cover on it. It wasn't clear to me if he's saying he sounds like he's going like the Rash. Maybe something like the Chacham Tzvi. Both. He says even for Tevillas Keilim that are glass that are only chayitzim with Rabbanan. He says even for glass you should be machmir lechatchila. He says for glass in the Rabbanan. Okay. He said you should not have a great cover, meaning not like the Ravyah. So again, the way it looks to me, the fact that the Ramah says that you could tell on a basket and the whole world's got baskets tells me not the Chacham Tzvi, and the Chazanish is very strong against the Chacham Tzvi. And between the other sheets, the Chazanish favors the Rash. There aren't as many nafkaminas between those two, between the Rash and the Ravyah. There aren't as many nafkaminas between them. Okay.